Hello, everyone. We are back with another episode today of Raw Honey, and I'm really excited to introduce one of my mentors and friends and colleagues, Delaney Brown. And I've known her for a couple years, and we have stayed in really great communication. She's been a really important part of my just my progression in this career and my just one of my role models. So whenever you want to, just say a little bit about yourself, ma'am, and then you can go into your story of resilience.
Hey, Cece, thank you. Yeah, so I was trying to think a little bit ago as I was talking to my husband, like how many years it has been since I met you, and I think it was like 4 or 5 years at this point.
Yeah, I
So
think
it's crazy
so.
to think of like how much we have both changed and
Yeah.
developed as people and where we are in our lives since then. And you know, that's actually, as I was preparing for this, or as I was thinking about resiliency in my own life, like really the narrative that took shape. Because when I think about my own life, like I do think in a lot of regards it's been very easy, or at least absent of adversity in a traditional sense. And so the example that came to mind was kind of this long, winding, unfolding reckoning with what happens when, like, Army values don't match with my reality, or like with the narrative that I'd been taught at West Point doesn't match with what I was seeing and what I was living. And so first I'll apologize because like I still get like very anxious when I think about or talk about kind of this period in my life, because it was just stressful and bad and not not good. And so I was in Baghdad during the surge on like my first deployment, and it felt like everything in my life had kind of like been building for this moment. You know, the deployed platoon leader, and like, you know, we were going to save Iraq from the throes of dictatorship. And you know, what I was confronted with was a lot of sexual harassment and a lot of not feeling valued, or like it's just valued. And in addition to that, reckoning with feeling like the work that I was doing, these long days, 7 days a week that we were putting in, wasn't actually getting Iraq any closer towards a stable democracy or independent governance, or really anything. And I felt, and I should preface this by saying, like, I have no idea what the objective truth was. Like, I was a second lieutenant or maybe a first lieutenant at this point, and I have purposefully not revisited kind of like the veracity of my memories. But it felt like we were, you know, just kind of engaged in like gang warfare kind of like squabbles, and were, you know, just as disruptive to the local community as anyone else. And so, you know, professionally, I felt like the work I was doing wasn't contributing to this nascent democracy. Personally, I felt like nobody cared that, you know, I was getting hit on in every training meeting by my company commander. I couldn't get anyone to care that, you know, I didn't feel safe walking home at 2 a.m. when I got off shift. And like, it was just a really dark period for me. We'd been deployed at that point for over a year, and you know, I still had 3 months left. It was just like,
wow,
horrible. You know, it was just like a really, really low point for me to go from this like dreamy, optimistic cadet finishing school to this disillusioned, really bitter first lieutenant.
wow.
And so anyway, that just sets up the story. That's none of the, that was not the part of resilience.
Okay, you have not been resilient thus far in the story, okay?
And like, I did come home very angry and very disillusioned is probably the nicest way to say it. And I wouldn't, even now, I don't think I would say that like I had PTSD, but I would say that I was very angry and very disillusioned with the Army, and kind of disinterested in investing in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I came home and kind of decided, like, ain't nobody else going to fix this situation for me.
Mm-hmm.
If you've learned anything from the past 15 months, like, it's that nobody else is going to help you fix this. And I would say that's when, like, the resilience started kicking in, and when I was like, am I really going to walk away from the Army, from these things that I think are good values, from this institution that I think does have a lot to offer both America and the world? And am I going to do so this angry, or what am I going to do to be a part of the solution? And so, you know, I started learning a lot about how institutions themselves run. Like, how do you set up a police department? How do you set up a fire department? How do you set up a local government? How do you set up voting booths? Like, kind of the behind-the-scenes machinations of a functional civil society. And in doing so, like, learning this on the side, taking, like, online courses through FEMA, I realized that the Army actually does an entire branch of this, civil affairs, right? Like, this is a thing that we do. And I stumbled upon a mentor and somebody, my brigade commander at the time, had heard that I had gone TDY to play soccer and was like, are you that lieutenant I keep hearing about that's been gone for 2 months? I was like, yes, sir. It's like, all right, what do you want to do? Like, I'll give you any job to keep you in the brigade. Like, what do you want? And I said, oh, I want to do this thing. I want to do civil affairs or non-lethal targeting. And he said, okay. And then, like, it was through kind of that, like, ownership. And really, I would say, like, for the first time in my adult life, like, taking ownership of the path that I wanted and what I wanted the Army to mean to me, that I kind of started turning the corner. And very honestly, it probably took another, like, 4 years, like, just shy of meeting you, until I had really reckoned fully with how much anger I was holding on to from that really dark period on that first deployment.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of anger, but, you know,
I feel like I could pick that. I picked that up when I first met you too.
Did you? Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was. I just, in some of the comments that you would make about, like, your time at West Point or your time at the Army, I was like, oh, that's kind of scary. Like, I feel like she's the type that's, like, either seen or experienced some really not fair situations. And that's just kind of one of the impressions I got from some of the comments or stories and stuff.
It's probably very true, Cece, is, like, I think, because even, you know, having gone to grad school and been totally away from the Army for 2 years, it was really jaunting again to come back and to experience what I would say, like, the open sexism of West Point. Because it just hadn't, and it's not to say that, like, the civilian world is perfect or that sexism doesn't exist, but it's informal. It's not, like, the overt, in your face, we don't believe women are equal.
Yeah, it's
kind of way that West Point institutionalizes it, or the Army institutionalizes it. And so coming back into it, like, that's really where I realized that so much of my thinking had changed while I was in grad school, or while I had been, well, even when I was in Korea, I was on a really small base. There was only one other captain on the base, and so none of my friends were in the Army. It was all English teachers and expats in the community, and so I had just been away from kind of the Army, or, like, I had so few Army friends for, like, the 4 years leading up to that coming back into West Point was really daunting for me, and I had to do even more, or I guess more of that self-discovery a second time, to really be like, what do I think, what do I want this institution to mean to me, not what do I think the institution is saying to me.
So it was definitely, like, a triggering experience to come back.
Yeah, and on one hand, it really made me sad how little had changed.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to believe that, like, because I came back 8 years after I graduated, I think. And so it was like, a decade's passed. This place is going to be so much better, and it's going to be woke, and it's going to be, like, liberal, and it just wasn't. And, you know, I had this experience I guess in my second year teaching, so it would have been after I had you, that, you know, one of the guys in my office, like, openly said, like, I don't see why I should be friends with women. They have nothing to offer my career.
Cringe. Oh my gosh.
And I wondered, I was just like, my first reaction was jealousy, to be like, I wish I could just ignore, like, this portion of the population without any repercussion. And then, you know, it morphed into anger. It was like, but I need you. Like, I can't be successful without a network that includes you and includes people like you and your type of, like, infantry guy. And, like, so it was this kind of, like, consistent series of events that I've tried to be more cognizant of, or, like, work through my reactions to more deliberately, because that first, you know, experience a decade ago was so, it just, like, really put me in a dark place for a long time.
Why do you think that you came back to West Point then?
The more, or, like, the most honest answer is I needed to get away from the Army.
Okay.
Like, I felt like the Army was so small, or that, like, I was so clearly not wanted in it. Whether it was because I was a woman or because I just, like, wasn't interested in the lethal targeting aspects of intel, or I wasn't bought into the validity of our mission. Like, I don't know. It's probably some combination of all of them, right? But I just had this sense of I didn't belong in the Army and I didn't fit in the Army. And so for me, West Point was a way to get grad school and to get 2 years away from the Army and to, like, regroup, recover from, and to come to terms kind of, like, with who I was and what the institutions were. And there was kind of the sense of, like, wishing that I had women mentors.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you in your class this. I had a female tech 3 of my 4 years. But the first one, when I was a plebe, a freshman, she used to walk around the hallways holding a gas mask and would throw it at women and say we had 9 seconds to put it on, and if you couldn't get it on, she would march you down to the barber shop to get a haircut. Did I tell you guys about this?
No. Ew. Oh, yeah, gosh.
Something else, but, like, she had short hair, and her thing was that, like, long hair was detrimental to the mission or to mission readiness. And so, like,
oh my gosh.
And I can remember watching my roommate, like, literally dive, like, launch herself into the men's bathroom to avoid our attack. She was a black woman. She was like, I can't cut my hair off. Like, this is going to be a disaster. Like, she has no idea what she's saying. She tells me that I need to get my hair cut. My roommate launched herself into the bathroom. She was, like, walked into the hallway without realizing that her attack was there. And, like,
oh
so,
my gosh.
I had this kind of, like, Pollyanna idea, but in the back of my mind, that coming back, it could be, you know, a little more open about the Army is more than infantry. It's more than being a platoon leader. You know, there are all these other aspects to running an institution that fights wars, or that resources wars for the Department of Defense. And there was, like, some altruism, but really it was, I needed 2 years to kind of finish healing, or, you know, focus more intensively on healing.
And do you think that that is what that West Point allowed you to do, those things?
Yeah. I mean, I would like to think that I'm healthier now than I was before I went.
Yeah, I've definitely felt like you transitioned, even just in those 2 years that we knew each other. Like, by the time I graduated and you were about to leave, like, I felt like you were so different, and I was so surprised. But I was happy for you, but I was also like, wow, totally different than you were when you were teaching me in class.
Yeah, and like, that's softening. I've talked about it a lot, like how my first year, like, I was aggressive almost with the cadets. think it was actually your class. I like went pretty hard at a cadet that sat near me one day, because I was just like, she's internalized so much sexism and like really problematic beliefs without kind of seeing the effects of what she's saying. And like even that moment like stuck with me, and like I'm reliving the traumas or the situations how I dealt with them, not how I wish they had been handled. And so I spent a considerable amount of time like in that subsequent summer staff, just a different pace, right? You only have one section. You see them for however many hours a day, every day. Like really focusing on myself and like hearing what I was saying and seeing how I could better engage without necessarily, or without being adversarial, without kind of assuming the worst.
Yeah.
In the cadets or in my coworkers. So I think I left softer in like a good way.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Also like squishier, but in a good way, like more willing to acknowledge that there's good at West Point, or there's good in the Army, and there's good in people that, like, even though I could disagree with them in every which way, like, they're still motivated by genuine belief that they're doing the right thing, or by genuine belief in the country or in the Army. And so definitely that evolution continued there, and probably, I don't know, I would say that I am much happier on this side of grad school in West Point than I was before. How much of that was just kind of distance, and how much was the experiences themselves, I'm not sure, but I definitely am thankful that those opportunities presented themselves, that I was able to pursue them.
Yes, I'm gonna let my dogs out of my room because they're driving me crazy. Fine, we're gonna go outside. That's really what we're gonna do. Fine. I'm closing the door.
But when was that in?
They can stay outside. They're bothering me. But yeah, that's really interesting, and it's interesting because I heard a lot of the women that mentored me there shared similar like initial disappointments with where West Point was at versus what they thought it was going, where they thought it was going to be at with sexism. But I think as we all like grew, like the cadets, the mentees they had and them as mentors all grew into sort of I would say like a healthy consensus of it by the time they left, or at least healed from what they had been through, and helped their mentees also be like positive moving forward, and just a lot of positivity, a lot of, keep things aren't always going to be like perfect, but just a mindset of like, how can you be the change? And I really appreciated that, because we're coming out of West Point with 5 to 8 year contracts, so to just go out there with all this anger is not a super productive way to put your, to put your energy as a mentor, as a mentee.
You're absolutely right. And I think that for me, being deliberate about this institution is not perfect, but I love it, is something that I was capable of the second time I left West Point, but that I wasn't aware enough of, or I was too naive to really grasp when I left the first time. And, it just kind of set up that situation where the disillusion could be so swift and so severe. Whereas now it's like, yeah, institutions sure ain't perfect, but that's why I'm going to go to work every day and try to create policies that, give women a fighting chance on a professional career in the military, or that, lengthening maternity leave, or manning promotion boards so that you don't see these consistent, systematic trends.
Yeah.
So, it's just a very different perspective on it, from it doesn't exist to yes, it does exist, but like, ain't nobody gonna change it if I don't, so here we go.
Yeah, so But why in the Army? You know, is it because you've been in for a long time, or is it about the Army values? Like, what keeps you in this, you know, niche, extreme institution to make those type of changes, you know?
Yeah. So the first time I had to reckon with that when I got home from that first deployment, I was still in my mandatory commitment, or that initial commitment. And so I didn't have the choice to leave. And so that made it easy to like, well, I don't have a choice. We've got to continue to kind of invest in this thing and to make it happen. And then, much to the Army's like credit, they shape the grad school opportunities. And West Point, coming back to teach, like right as you're at that inflection point to get out. And so they hooked me there. And it's only in the last couple months that I've finished my commitment from grad school and have had the opportunity to kind of think about, would we leave? Like, what would the Army need to do or need to offer me to make it the right decision for my family and I to stay today? And I don't know if I had... Are you under blended retirement?
Yes, I am.
So I don't know if I were like, if I had that opportunity or had, you know, some level of 401k savings if I would stay. For us right now, like I'm in a non-deployable unit. I teleworked for the last year. Probably gonna telework for another year. Like for me right now, the Army's a really good place. It fits my interests, it fits my family, and it fits our desired lifestyle. So it's an easy decision right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and like, I don't know what's going to happen in a year. Who knows? But for right now, it fits, it works. And there is that sense of like, in 4 years, you know, I could have a retirement income, or 5 years, I could have a retirement income that would have enabled me to do anything, right? Like I could go get a part-time job at REI or go get a real job, you know, like a full-time career. So I don't know. I think we'll cross that bridge again, you know, next year when the market opens and we're forced to confront what our options are. But for right now, because it works and because I do think that I still have contributions that the Army doesn't know it wants yet, but it does.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always wrestling with that idea, and I feel like I can't really afford to wrestle with it at this part of my career because I have a long contract, and I'm like, I feel like I'm always thinking about like, but I think I have to have that mindset to feel like I have some agency. I have to feel like the Army needs me and not vice versa.
Absolutely.
Even though I obviously, you know, have a contract, it's just like the skills that I'm developing, the skills that I have are not specifically for the Army. They can be really helpful in the Army, and this is a good environment for me, but it doesn't mean that this is all I have. And so I think having that mindset is really important for me. But it does make it hard sometimes to be positive about like where I'm at in my career. So it's a balance, I guess.
I actually really like how you talked about changing that. Like you're doing something that is valuable to the Army, but you're doing it because it's valuable to you and it fits the Army. I would also say that like that first deployment when I was so frustrated, I wasn't passionate about intel or the targeting that I was doing. And it felt like I was developing skills just for the Army.
Yeah.
Like, since I got home on that deployment, I have never contemplated working in the intelligence community again. I was like, it's just not for me. Like it was a bad fit. And the work I do now, like sadly, I'm not an HR professional because I think that would be like my legit calling in the universe. And you know, like maybe that's what I do during my next assignment is get a grad degree in HR, or you know, develop some sort of skill set in HR, because I think I've been much slower to the realization of the Army is great if it's feeding me first, like, or if it's feeding my soul first. And I found a way to do that right now, and hopefully I can keep doing that for the next few years.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get to that step. I definitely have always been a like older than my age type of person, so I'm always thinking, I'm a visionary, so I have big goals, and it's hard for me to really be where I'm at, and so this waiting time frame to go into the program that I've been accepted to is just like definitely going to be a huge challenge for me. So I'm looking for some way to just be positive about where I'm at, and develop the environment in a way that feels like really true to me, and feels like it's true to it's another version of a stepping stone into the school, because it's really hard for me to just do things that have no connection to my dream and my passion and my purpose. So I can't really compartmentalize like my job and my passion and my purpose. I can't compartmentalize all those things and do them separately. Like, they all are very circular to me, so it's definitely going to be a challenge, but that's where I'm at, so.
Yeah, and actually listening to you say that, I'm wondering like how much of my kind of contentedness with the Army now is because I haven't had to, or like this is the first time where I don't feel like I've compartmentalized the parts of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I've worked from home for a good portion of the last year, and are there nights that I'm down here like checking email until 11 or midnight? Like, yeah. But do I also go to the grocery store at 2 o'clock on Wednesday because that's what I need to make sure that we have fresh fruit, vegetables for dinner? Like, yeah. And so finding that way to have all the parts of my life coexist, or to balance them, or blend the days together, to fit, Amazon returns and car inspections and daycare and vegetables together with substantive policy changes, has really, really been good for my soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess West Point, I started to be able to do that, or I saw myself as able to talk to cadets and develop them, and talk to the athletic teams that I sponsored, and develop that and balance out teaching responsibilities. Maybe in grad school. So yeah, it probably is very similar to where you are now, with the like kind of my healing curve, my healing path from a basic branch that didn't really jive with what I wanted, and feeling like my days weren't contributing anything to what I wanted long term. So yeah, actually, I think there is a lot of similarity there to what you're saying, and the frustrations you're feeling with what I'm saying was, not a great period of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't, a deployment environment's obviously much different, especially during that time in our country, but I had a really rough first job here, and I was just like semi-depressed, even though I'm like have mental health awareness. I was definitely aware that I was like in a very toxic environment where I was just in a steady state of like discontent, and definitely not okay. So it's taken this new environment I'm in is really, really good. So I'm definitely healing from that, and I'll probably see myself through the same type of healing if I end up going back to West Point or being able to mentor cadets, because I'm just like, you're about to go into the Army, like, it's such a toss-up, like, it's gonna take me a little bit to positively present that to cadets, honestly.
Yeah, And I would even, now that I'm wise and old, offer that, like, no institution is perfect, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we get into this sense of hero worship at West Point, where, like, the Army is the end-all be-all, and it's the best way to serve or the only way to serve your country, and uniform service is unique and special and, honorable, and you're a hero right off the bat. And like, that's not true, right? There are these flaws, and there are certainly people in uniform that are terrible human beings, and there are people in uniform who, skate out on work as much as possible. And the disillusionment phase of being a lieutenant is, for me, very hard. And I hear you saying some of the same things. But, once I came to reckon with the institution is flawed, but it's still good, I find myself actually having a lot more compassion for other organizations like Boy Scouts of America or the Catholic Church or, my local city government. Like, they're deeply flawed institutions that have made regrettable decisions at the organizational level, but that doesn't negate all of the good that happens as well, right? Like, it's a very, or the concepts are in tension, and they don't jive well when you're, like, young and opportunist, or like, see the world in rose-colored glasses. But I find myself now just much more willing to hold these two ideas in tension of, like, really, really awful, terrible things happen in the Army. It's still a good institution.
Yeah, I think everyone has to be able to either see that or not see that, and make decisions based on what they're willing to tolerate and be okay with. So I feel like West Point to me was I just had such a great time there. There was definitely difficult times, but like it was definitely like my rose-colored understanding of everything. And the Army was a big wake-up call for me.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Really, about my experience. Like, I was so confident that, like, West Point was the greatest place on earth, and that I was joining the greatest institution on earth, and that, like, it was honorable, and we were going to go save or, like, spread democracy and, like, defend the American homeland. And, in my experience, like, that's just not what happened over the next couple of years. And the values that I thought I understood, or that I thought I had a shared understanding of with my peers, like, turned out I was wrong. Or, like, had been on a different page. And yeah, I don't know, like, exactly what in there I would say was, like, resilient, or, like, what the strategies were. But it definitely was, like, a really long road from that disillusioned, angry first lieutenant to today.
Yeah, I think I'm still in the middle of the angry first lieutenant phase. I'm definitely not,
good, right? Like, you can make the decision to leave the Army and to chart, like, a totally different path, just to say, like, the institution isn't for me, or it doesn't allow me to align my knowledges, my skills, my behaviors in a way that advances my vision, and I can do that better elsewhere. And that's great. Like, the Army needs people to go do that. Like, you still have a great education, you still have had opportunities, you still can be an ambassador for the Army or for the school years down the road. Or you can stay and you can say, like, hey, I actually do think that I have this unique intersection of talents that will allow me to help other lieutenants or young NCOs or whoever reconcile their beliefs with their reality in a way that advances national security or defense of the nation, or just that makes me happy. And, like, all of those are okay. And it took actually finding my husband or marrying him to realize that there's no right answer. Because he and I used to, like, I would get so stressed about decisions, and he'd be like, there's no right answer. Like, they're just different ones. the first few times he said it, I'd get so angry. I was like, no, there is a right answer. Like, what if I don't pick it? Like,
that's so funny.
You know, that's probably another thing that's like changed for me in the last 4 years, is kind of going from there's a right and a wrong option to, no, there are different ones and they have different outcomes, different trade-offs. But whatever I didn't pick wasn't going to be perfect either. And there would have been unexpected twists or unexpected disadvantages with that one as well.
Yeah, that's definitely huge when you bring another person into it all. It's just, everything becomes much more, every decision seems to be a lot more complex when someone else is involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, in our case, there's a toddler who also thinks that his views should be considered.
Yes, of course. Of course.
If they're not well expressed. Inarticulately expressed.
Yeah.
And maybe that is like another aspect of what has kind of changed or softened in my mind. It's just like, you know, I read many well-intentioned baby books just to be like, well, that doesn't actually fit my kid. Like, it turns out that that's not going to work. So my options are to believe that I am the world's worst mother and my son will never be okay, or to accept that there are multiple ways to do this. So here we go.
Yeah, I definitely wrestle when it comes to family and army. Those are like, I always look to you guys. I look to the mentors, the female mentors that I had, to navigate the mental piece of all of that, because I'm just like, how do we do this? This is so different. But it's not uncharted. It's just you have to sort of have mentors that are like in that world, that are in that dual military or military mother role, and it's really, I think there's a really good group of support, but it's you have to be talking to those kind of people to feel at peace with the waters you're about to go into.
I think for me, a lot of it has been being exceptionally conscious or like deliberate in my own thoughts about what the trade-offs are and which ones are necessary and which ones I'm making because of assumptions that I had internalized. Like, for example, I think I know like 1-2 women general officers that have children, and I would be hard pressed to come up with like any male general officers I know that don't have children.
Yeah.
And so in my own mind, it was like, you have children, you retire as a lieutenant colonel. Like, there's just that ceiling that women have, or that women in the Army have. And, you know, now that we have our son, like, thinking through, like, is that lieutenant colonel's ceiling mine? Or are there ways that, you know, I can have him and still achieve colonel, or still achieve general officer, or still achieve a civilian career after this, or like kind of how do I balance that out? And, you know, consciously reminding myself that like women in the civilian sector face the same consternation or the same trade-offs. Like, there aren't women in C-suites with children, or there, you know, are significantly fewer women in C-suites with children than there are men with children. So, you know, just kind of being aware that the problem in my bubble is women in the Army that can't do these things, but really we're talking about a much larger societal shift and a much larger societal problem that wouldn't go away from me just because I left, you know, rather than going to my next assignment. Just, I guess, having that little perspective helps me right now as I, like, you know, crush my soul trying to get to daycare after, you know, working at a breakneck pace all day because I still have to get to the commissary before, you know, 4:30 when my son needs a dinner, and like, you know, just little tricks. I don't even know if tricks, just like ways that I tell myself that it's okay now, that I didn't have 8 years ago.
Yeah, I think it just takes so much humility to be a working mother, especially one in the military. Just so much humility and so much, You have to be so aware of comparisons and structural sexism and just subconscious assumptions to be just present with your decisions and your life and be happy about it all and be okay with it.
Mm-hmm. And accepting that, you know, we made the choice to have a child.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that was not anyone else's decision. That's one that we made. Like, we bear all the costs and the benefits associated with that decision. In a way that I don't know how like common this is, but certainly when I left West Point, I felt like there was always somebody else responsible for what was happening. Like, you know, the old mantra that, like, if the Army wanted you to have it, they would have issued it to you. Like, I felt like everything, like, there was somebody else that was constantly responsible for my life decisions, and that I was just kind of this...
puppet or something.
Yeah, puppet or a pawn, or, like, you know, that I lacked agency, to use your term. And that's probably been one of the other, like, major shifts in my life since that first deployment, was just really starting to take ownership. Like, and to the point where today, like, as cliche or, like, absolutely mortifying as it is, like, I hired a life coach because I was like, I don't actually know how to think about what I want after the Army.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's 5 years away, and I don't know how to think about this thing. It's this huge glaring gap in my life. Like, what do I want to do when all of the decisions are mine? And, you know, I thought she would be this, like, huge breakthrough enabling, like, life force. And instead, it's, like, little things that she shows me that are all the ways that I still haven't asserted full agency over my life, or that I still allow the Army or my current construct to put me on a really narrow path.
Yeah.
But it's also been incredibly good for my mental health to be like, oh yeah, like, I chose to limit the options to this, and that's why it's here. Like, I can go back and I can change it. There are costs, but, like, I did this thing, or I contributed to the decisions that put me here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the Army, and just an intense institution like this, is like everyone's it's like everyone's crutch. It can become everyone's crutch in a way, but at the same time everyone, like, can be really angry at it at the same time. So it's like, are you really angry at the Army, or are you really angry, like, at yourself for not being aware of all the decisions that you could have been making? But since you didn't, this institution sort of just, like, put it in there for you. But are you really mad at that? Are you really mad at the fact that you didn't know that they were actually, you could have made the decisions?
So it's funny to hear you say it, because I think that same argument at work, that selfless service is, like, a total myth in the Army. Like, when I look around at the general officers that lead the Army at its strategic, its operational levels, like, they have so selfishly oriented their entire family's energies, their entire life, everything about their existence towards the Army, at the expense of their spouse's career, at the expense of their child's education, at the expense of a relationship with their children, at the expense of, you know, increased household income from, or spousal satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, to me, that's not what I ever understood selfless service to be about. And so it's kind of reconciling these two different things, or, like, finding a way to put them, or to overlay the two in a way that I can find alignment, and I can still find goodness without, you know, falling victim to the trope of the only service to your nation is in uniform. When, you know, like, at my core, I don't believe that. I think the Peace Corps or Teach for America, or any of these, like, really underpaid park rangers or teachers are absolutely still serving the country, but without any of the fanfare, any of the ego that we tie up into military service. Yeah. So I make that argument on a regular basis, that, like, our espoused values don't match what we reward, what the Army rewards.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a matter of definitions and coming to grips with your own set of decisions. Like, you know, all those GO's wives made decisions to stay in that life or to, you know, advance somebody else's career or to raise their children, you know, with the spouse who's been deployed for 12 of the last 15 years or kind of whatever their paths are. And that's their own agency. It's not mine. You know, I chose a different path. I could have chosen a life much like theirs, right? Where I don't see, or I don't participate in raising a child or the development of a marriage. And I didn't. That's not my path.
But I feel like it doesn't have to be so black and white. Like it's like to say they didn't participate in it. I feel like that's our perspective, but their perspective of it is just participating in a much different way. And that is participating to them, even though from a different perspective it doesn't seem like they're participating. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think generalized, but like the guy that's at the top of my career field, like the first time I met him did say he has no relationship with his children, and that's the truth.
Wow, that's pretty blunt. I don't know how you could argue with that one.
But you're right, like there are absolutely, and I can think of like one of my classmates whose dad retired as a 4-star, and he was incredibly present in their lives, and like, you know, they all run the Army 10-miler at the same time, no matter where they are in the world. But like it's their family thing to like all run together. And so you're right. That's a very good point. Like there are people that make different trade-offs, and I shouldn't speak in absolutes about a diverse group of individuals.
Yeah, I was writing I had to write a paper on my ethical dilemma because part of the AMED application you have to also apply to the University of Kentucky, which is like the sponsored program that teaches it. Does that make sense? It's like they have some kind of satellite course that sponsors the social work program.
Okay.
So I had to write. It was kind of funny because they're like, in 250 words or less, write like your biggest ethical dilemma, and I was like, realized how short 250 words is to write that. But I was writing it, and I was speaking sort of what we're speaking on, like. I said my biggest dilemma is trying to like figure out how to progress in a career and also progress in my goals to have a family and be in a relationship and be a good just friend and spouse and mother and sister and everything else, but also be a good soldier. And can the two like coexist when it seems like they both need things that sort of don't align with both of them? Like how do you achieve both of those goals? And so I was talking about that, and I kind of came to the consensus that it just, you know, if you have to be there's trade-offs, and as long as you and your family are aware of that, and you're all getting your needs met in a certain way, like your service for the country can be your service for your family in a way, and that the two can coincide. That's just kind of what I concluded to, and obviously it's really vague, but 250 words is not
a lot.
It was more specific than that, but I felt like I was writing some kind of like back of the book cover summary of an very army book, but I feel like I understand the depths of it in my head. I don't know if I made sense of it just now.
I would do a yes and to me the critical dimension is the overtime, right? Like you can balance in one direction while your partner is deployed or while your partner is remote. Like maybe what that's happening is the same time you throw yourself into your studies or into your career, or you know, maybe that's the opposite. Like you can't throw yourself into your studies and your career because you have a child that you also need to or that you're suddenly single parenting.
Yeah.
And so just realizing the give and take of that over time, like, is it fair each day when, you or your spouse are dealing with 90% of the childcare, maybe not, but if, over 10 years you look back and you're like, yeah, it was generally even, or it wasn't even, but it was generally what we had agreed to,
yeah,
or like that's the time dimension. In my mind is the more complicated one, because especially like out of my first 8 years, I spent 6 of them overseas or deployed, like in Korea, and then 3 deployments, and like that, like the time aspect of it is what really kind of got to me. It wasn't that any one deployment was more than I could bear or was more than I was willing to do, but it was like 6 out of my 8 years are deployed, and I look around at these other people in Intel that haven't deployed or that deployed once. Like this is where I start to feel like the bargain wasn't being fulfilled. And so the only thing I would add, Cece, is just like a time element to your ethical questioning and saying like there are times in which I don't know, I might telework for 2 years because I have a toddler and my husband is working full time, and I can afford to not be in the office for 14 hours a day. But maybe the next time my kid's a little boy and my son's career is more stable, and the decision is like, no, I want to be a full bird colonel. I'm going to go hard at this plans job in like the most difficult op tempo in the Army. Like maybe, I don't know, we'll see. But that's just something to be negotiated and talked about.
Yeah, of course.
Later.
It's definitely not a blanketed unilateral decision when you're serving and you have a family. So yeah, I wish I would have. I feel like I hope I portrayed that in my essay. I already turned it in, so there's no turning back.
Well, I say there's more important to be our own awareness of it, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
That the agreements we make today, could be revisited tomorrow or in a year or in, I don't know, a decade or at retirement or.
Yeah, that it's always going to change, and how you feel about the Army, how you feel about your family, your everything is fluid. Yeah, and so that's a big part of it for me too, that I'm just trying to work on being curious about, instead of being like, no, I was supposed to do this, like you were supposed to do this, I was supposed to do this, we were supposed to do this. It's just like, what are you interested in? How can we come together in the long game to meet our family goals with these different, passions or dreams that are starting to, recreate themselves. So just trying to be curious, like, all the time, and not so disappointed instead of like what I thought was supposed to happen or how things were supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, my husband's career is pretty niche. Like the actual thing that he is interested in doing in his actual job is like very limited geographically, and the Army only has bases in so many places, and so like you said, like just trying to be cognizant of what our agreements were in the past, of what our interests are moving forward. And for me, it's also been kind of that debate again of like, do I retire as lieutenant colonel because I've had kids, or is there some other ambition or need that I have from the Army that I haven't yet fulfilled? And I find it being curious with myself, like not accepting those base assumptions that are nobody's fault but my own for having internalized or having bought into without curiosity. But that's my own struggle, at 36 or whatever.
I feel like we covered such an interesting range of like moral dilemmas as a female in the military. I mean, it definitely applies to males as well, but I think females, it's sort of a mandatory process we all go through. Like sexism is a mandatory feeling that we have to figure out how to get past and motherhood and all these questions that are just huge decision points for all of us in the military.
Yeah, because you're playing by a set of rules that weren't designed for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, the game wasn't designed to include you. And so you're trying to figure out, or I'm trying to figure out, women are trying to figure out how to fit within those rules. And I think what I like so much about my current job is it's as much about how do we make women fit in as it is how do we change the rules to make them fit women. Because, you know, there are men who are dual career in the military, but the proportion is so much lower than the number of women who are dual profession.
Yeah, of course.
And so the ability to accommodate two careers just hits women much harder as a group than it does men.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's why I was so keen to find female mentors at West Point that were dual military, because I really saw that as my future. Because I guess I could have tried. I didn't really date any civilians, but just like it would take a very specific type of civilian to agree with the lifestyle that they were going to be into with me. And so that just seems like it was never going to work out. Like I just wasn't even interested in trying that, which is funny since that's like the complete opposite for men, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I'm only going to date a civilian. Like that's all. I only like the civilians. So it's,
yeah, I'm going to go look at these colleges around West Point.
Yeah, exactly.
My partner, rather than, you know, women who predominantly date other cadets that are right there. And yeah. But I will say, I went to a baby shower yesterday for a woman that I went to the career course with, and there were probably 5 women there total. All 5 of us were, you know, I guess majors. I think we're all majors. All 5 of us are married. None of us are married to a service member.
Wow.
There's a bunch of former, and then we had 2 pure civilians, but none of the women were married to somebody in the Army. And it was the first time I have ever been in that environment where I was like, huh.
Wow.
How strange. Like, it's always the men who have work in common, and then the women are left trying to, like, find commonality. And in this situation, all the women worked together. And the men had, you know, were like off talking about the Super Bowl or whatever because they didn't have work in common. This is crazy.
That is crazy. I mean, I'm excited to see it broaden because Lord knows if the men become the ones that are in that situation, like the rules will definitely change a lot faster. So that makes I'm kind of like you know, it's a double-sided coin on that. I'm like kind of frustrating that now, you know, now it's a problem that you're facing it, but women have been facing it since the beginning. But I mean, whatever it takes. So
right, but at the same time, let's address this.
Yeah. Exactly.
I finally woke up like let's fix this.
I know.
On that note, my tiny human is
of course. Well, thank you so much for joining Raw Honey, and I hope everyone has a great day. And you guys can always reach out to me on Facebook if you want to ask questions or talk to one of our guests for some reason. But until next time, everyone has a great weekend if I publish it today, hopefully, and we will see you next time. Bye.